Which also goes back to my point of how I don't know how you guys can ride without helmets. Take a June bug to your forehead, holy fuck, man. Shaved my face, guys. Way to shave off your manhood, bro. Nice baby face. Oh yeah, I've never heard that one before. Moving on, welcome back to the channel to part 3 of the Katana Street Fighter build. And we got some new things in the box that I'm super excited about. So here's the new gauge cluster. The closest that I could find to a Ducati style gauge cluster where it's all on one screen, super modern, LED, looks great. Mainly because it's a Ducati inspired Street Fighter. Also because I can't really afford a $30,000 bike, so I would rather just take the one that I have that's paid off and build it up the way I want it to be. So that's what we're doing. So I'm really excited about this gauge cluster. It's got everything and then some that the old one had. It's got the gear indicator, neutral indicator, your blinker, headlight indicator, speedometer, tachometer, clock, fuel level, oil pressure, temp. I mean, everything is all on one screen. Super nice and slim and just clean. I can't wait to put it in there. Super excited about that. Here's what these look like. They got the daytime running lights here. So if you missed part 1 and part 2, just go back and watch. But for those of you that are too fucking lazy to do that, I'll sum it up for you a little bit. So part 1 was a how-to video on changing your motorcycle tires, how to safely break them in before you go ripping, tater chipping. So you can go back and watch that. Part 2, we tore off all the old fairings except for the rear gauge cluster headlight assembly, ripped all that off, stopped on the new one, and yeah, this is what that looks like. Just those nice modern daytime running lights that you see on just about everything nowadays. I just love the look of that. And then my blinkers are on my mirrors, same mirrors I had on the bike previous to the build. I love the way they look. So the theme I'm going is pearl white with gold accents. As you can see, I started with my brake lever, clutch lever, and then I got all the little gold miscellaneous nuts and bolts in a kit, gold steering damper. So it's just going to be pearl white, all kinds of little miscellaneous gold things. Might do a shorty exhaust, I'm not 100% sure. Full plans for part 3. Going to be hooking up the new gauge cluster. Basically what I'm going to do for that is just look up a wiring diagram of this bike so I can figure out which wires are what, and then I'll basically just plug and play until I figure it out. Going to be taking the side fairings like I explained in part 2, cutting a little chunk out of here to make a vent on this side, and also to have that nice clean body line to follow up my tank here. In the box is the new setup. You Honda boys probably already spotted this one out, but for those of you that don't know, this, my friends, is a 2004 CBR 600 RR tail fairing. She's quite a bit wider. She's gonna have a fat ass. So finally, yes, it's time to get started and stop talking. Right after we picked the beer of the day. So my supply's a little low, but I just went and picked up some of my favorite porters, and obviously I always have my Coors Banquets in the fridge because my Coors Banquets are always there for me. But everyone in my friend group has been talking about these Pabst hard coffees, so I'm about to see what all the hype is about. All right, Pabst Blue Ribbon hard coffee. Oh, guys, it smells just like one of those Frappuccinos, like the Starbucks Frappuccinos. Kind of that mixed with the milkshake. That's pretty fucking good. I mean, I'm a dark beer, stout and porter kind of guy, but I mean, I like a nice flavor pack like this. So if you haven't tried the Pabst Blue Ribbon hard coffee yet, just give it a go. I mean, it tastes really fucking good. It tastes just like those Frappuccinos, and then you get that little spike of alcohol at the end. Time to take off this pretty front end that I've put together so I can tear into the wiring harness. Coming to say hi, Duke? Huh? You love photobombing Daddy, don't ya? Don't ya? Okay, here's the scariest part of everything. Just do it. Alright. Should be good. So now I'm going to try and hook up my tachometer. Fuck yeah, we figured out the tachometer. See if we can get a speedometer reading. Okay, just kind of hold everything the best I can. Turn my key on. Then I'm gonna roll the bike and see if I can't get at least a mile per hour to know if I got the wires hooked up right. Yes! There we go. You can see it counting back down that I stopped. So our speedometer is in fact hooked up correctly. Well, if you're watching, Matt, thanks, bro. Definitely helped me out on that one. Alright, so got all those other wires hooked up, and then I kind of just zip tied it to my two mounting prongs here on this. This is all temporary, like I said. The bracket that I'm going to make to mount all this together on one piece will be made in another video. In part 4 of the next video. But this is what I got for now. I just glued this to my handlebars here, my gear indicator, because the one that's on here has 6 different wires for each gear, and that's not how this bike is set up, so I'm probably not going to be able to use that one, but I will be able to use this one since I already have it wired. So we're just going to keep this one and then just let that one do its thing. But I got it all hooked up, so we'll turn the key. You can see how it all boots up. So as you can see, I'm in neutral. So once I shift her down into 1, that goes away. Half shift back up to neutral, and my other one thinks that I'm in first gear. But then we have left turn, that's wired up. Right turn, that's wired up. Now we're going to go and test the tachometer, because I know that when I'm going 60 in 6th gear, my tach's usually between 5 and 6, so I'll be able to tell if that's accurate that way. But we're going to hook up the speedometer app on the phone and watch it and see, you know, how far off it is or how accurate it is. And then we'll see if we can calibrate it. That is definitely not an accurate speed. What the fuck? It says I'm going 124 miles an hour. What I'm thinking is that I have the black wire and the pink wire backwards. I'm thinking maybe that's my problem, because yeah, I'm going 36, but this speedometer says I'm going 124. Yeah, I don't really know. But we're gonna go back and tinker with it. It's a nice Evo. Could use a paint job. It's kind of fading. Come on, bro. I flipped the wires. I thought that was the problem. It ended up not being the problem. I found out that it stayed at 0. The speedometer read nothing when I flipped them, so I flipped them back the right way. I still couldn't figure it out. So I came in the garage, sat down, drank a beer, thought about it, and then I decided to read back through the settings again. Basically how you program the gauge cluster, and it's a series of clicking the little button on the side. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but once you get down to setting 7, you can program it, the wheel circumference setting. I didn't notice that at first, and I thought that I didn't have to worry about that since I wasn't going to use the little speed sensor that came with it. I was going to use the one on the bike. So I'm like, okay, wheel circumference, duh. Maybe I have the wrong number. So I measured my wheel, a diameter of 17-inch rim, which is what I have, but with the tire added, it's like 23 and a half inches from the bottom of the tire to the top of the tire. So I threw that in. I went upstairs. I have AutoCAD on my computer because I do engineering drafting during the day for a day job. So I have access to AutoCAD. If you don't, you can probably find a calculator online to convert it for you. Anyway, 23.5 inches. It came to, I think, 183 centimeters, something like that, something close to that. So I punched that in, and it was still rapidly increasing. I was going 20, it said I was going like 130. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So I came back. On the way back, it dawned on me that the original speed sensor that's on the bike for the original gauge cluster isn't on a wheel. It's somewhere inside the engine reading a much smaller number. It's on some kind of a pin or shaft or gear or whatever it's reading that's spinning, but it's a much smaller number. So I'm like, okay. So I have to just tinker with that circumference number until I can get it more accurate. So I dropped it from 183 centimeters to 50 centimeters, and it slowed way down. It was still off, but it was a lot slower. So then what I did was I was trying to find that medium line. So I dropped it down to 10 centimeters, went for another ride, then it was way too slow. So I bumped it up and I just kept rising it number by number, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And finally when I got to 16, it was actually like close. Like I had 3 speedometer apps with GPS. So I set my phone up and I was looking at both numbers to try to get an accurate reading. And when I hit 16 for my circumference, whatever's in the engine, it was accurate. Like 3 speedometer apps, they were fucking like within a digit. And then I had the wife follow me in her car. She was going the same speed. Then I went out on the highway going 70, and everyone around me was going about the same speed. So I'm like, okay, this is it. So we figured it out, and now we're gonna go for a little ride just so I can prove it to you. All right, guys. So as I said, it's like I know that this is a lot more accurate than the GPS just because it's reading the actual speed sensor on the bike. But that's because it's true speed on the sensor when the GPS has to calculate and catch up. So now that I got to my steady speed of 23, 24, my app also says 23, 24. You know, so, and then this kind of jumps around a little bit as the GPS is switching back and forth. But you can see there's 25, there's 24, it switched back to 24. So I know that this is accurate. And it's consistent. When I'm going 11 miles an hour, it says 11 when it finally gets there. When the speedometer says 60, and this finally gets to where it's balancing out, it's at 60. Sorry, I'll shut my visor. Just got smoked in the nose by a fucking whatever the hell was flying in the air and it hurt, so I'm shutting the visor. Which also goes back to my point of how I don't know how you guys can ride without helmets. Take a June bug to your forehead, holy fuck, man. Okay, so now we're going 58. See how it says 61 here? It'll slowly settle itself back down. It's weird. So I'll climb up to 60, if you can see that. This thing's kind of dim, guys. I'm not real impressed with the brightness of this. Like when you're out in the sun, you can't even fucking see it. Unless you tip it way at an angle like that, then you can kind of see it. I really don't even know if the camera's picking that up or not. But speedometer says 50. That's 52 until it starts to climb down like that. I don't know why it does that, because I'm still going 50. Seeing it drop down to 50. So I know that my setting of 16 centimeters is apparently the setting for the Katanas, and I'm sure it's the same from 98 all the way to 2006. So if you're trying to do that for this particular bike, I'm just going to help you out in advance. When you're doing your wheel circumference setting, if you're using your stock speed sensor, it's in fact 16 centimeters. For some reason, that works. Okay, we're back in the shop. Everything works good on the speedometer. So we're gonna go ahead and put the side fairings back on temporarily so I can mark my line, and then we're gonna cut out of the original side fairings that vent that I was talking about. And I'm not 100% sure if I'm gonna paint them white or wrap them in some carbon fiber. Kind of just depends on how it looks, but we'll see. banquet's always there for me. So here's how it looks with both of them. I love that. I fucking love it. It gives it a little more beefiness where it should be around the engine, and it just kind of fills in that area. And that's how it looks from the front. So obviously I have to match both sides up a little bit better, but this will obviously have a mesh. So I'm gonna follow on with this body line, and then it'll be like a nice mesh here with the signal behind it. But this is gonna direct a lot of air to the back side of the engine here to cool it. So it's gonna just come in here and just get whipped right into the engine. So that way it can cool that, and then my knees actually come in right here. So it should pull a lot of the heat away from my knees, so it's not cooking my knees the whole time, because when the air is coming in here, it should flip the cool air in towards the engine, and then a lot of that should be pushed down with the way this goes, so I won't have to worry about just freaking cooking my legs. Because that's one thing that I did notice was a significant difference, was the amount of heat I could feel on my legs. But I love the way that looks. Well, not a whole lot more we can do right now. I have to wait for the seats to come for the rear fairing before I can figure out how I want to mount it, because the seats are part of the mounting. So that is a wrap for part 3, and we'll see you in part 4 when we start cutting up the frame. Peace.